Dad perfect events. The frosting from my retirement cake was still stuck to the corner of the divorce papers when my son Victor started the slow clap. Then my daughter Linda joined in. Then the whole damn room, 200 people I thought were there to celebrate 40 years of hard work, erupted in applause while my wife Patricia held that manila envelope above her head like a trophy. My name's Howard Feldman. I'm 60 years old, and I just watched my family auction off my dignity at a Holiday Inn banquet hall. The air smelled like cheap champagne and expensive perfume. This was supposed to be my night, the culmination of 35 years climbing from a truck driver to VP of Finance at Midwest Logistics. I'd worked night shifts to get my CPA license. I'd missed Little League games and dance recitals to close quarterly reports. I'd done everything right, built a life worth $4.8 million, $1.8 million in retirement accounts, $800,000 in investments, $450,000 in home equity, $550,000 liquid, plus $1.2 million in the family trust my father left me, and this was my reward. Patricia stood at the microphone in a red dress that cost more than my first car, a dress I paid for naturally. She didn't look at me when she spoke to the crowd. Howard has worked so hard to provide for us, she said, her voice amplified and dripping with false gratitude. But today marks a new chapter. He's retiring from work, and I'm retiring from being his wife. The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds, just long enough for the shock to hit. Then Victor clapped. My 32-year-old son, who'd burned through $400,000 of my money on 3 failed startups, stood up and applauded his mother for destroying our family. Linda raised her champagne glass. Finally, Mom, you're free. Free. That's what she called it. Not abandonment. Not betrayal after 38 years of marriage. Freedom. I looked at the papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. They'd planned this. The venue, the timing, the public, and execution, all orchestrated to maximize my humiliation. Patricia wanted me to beg, to cry, to give her ammunition for her lawyers. She wanted the angry, controlling husband she'd probably been describing to her friends for months. But I didn't feel anger, not yet. I felt something colder, something mathematical. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my fountain pen. It was a Mont Blanc my father gave me when I passed the CPA exam in 1989, the only luxury item I'd ever bought for myself. Patricia's smile started to crack. She expected resistance. She'd brought her lawyer, some shark named Roger Hastings, who was currently smirking by the bar. She wasn't ready for immediate surrender. Sign it, Howard, Patricia hissed, leaning close. Don't make this difficult. I want half the brokerage accounts, the house, alimony. Roger says we can drag this out for years, or you can sign and keep some dignity. Dignity. Rich word from a woman who just turned my retirement party into performance. Article. I looked past her at Victor. He was already on his phone, probably calculating how much of Dad's money would be coming his way. He had no idea. None of them did. I uncapped the pen. The ink flowed smooth onto the signature line. Howard Eugene Feldman. Same signature I'd used on billion-dollar contracts and employee termination letters. I knew how to cut losses. As I handed the papers back, I leaned in close enough that only Patricia could hear. You just triggered Protocol Omega, she laughed. That high-pitched nervous sound she makes when she's pretending to understand something. What are you talking about, you old fool? There's no prenup. I know exactly what we own. I capped my pen and put it back in my pocket. Enjoy the party, Patricia. You're paying for it. I turned and walked toward the exit. Victor stepped into my path, chest puffed out, scotch in hand. He was wearing a suit 2 sizes too small. European cut, he called it. Just looked desperate to me. Going? Somewhere, Dad? He asked. Not so fast. We need the keys. I stopped. Keys to what? The credit cards, the house keys. Mom's lawyer says since you're leaving the marital home, you can't take marital assets. He snapped his fingers at me. Actually snapped his fingers. Hand them over. I looked at my son. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike. I remembered the $80,000 I spent on his philosophy degree that he never used. I remembered funding 3 startups that failed because he refused to wake up before noon. He truly believed the money was his, a pile of gold sitting in a vault, waiting for him to claim it. You want the wallet? I asked. Victor held out his hand, snapping his fingers again. "Give it." I pulled out my old leather wallet. Inside was a debit card, a corporate credit card, and about $40. I took the cash and slapped the wallet into his hand. "Here you go, son. Keys to the house." I dropped the brass keyring into his palm. "And the car." I tossed my Ford's keys at his feet. They clattered on the tile. Victor kicked them aside, grinning. "Have a nice life, Dad. Don't worry about us. We'll take good care of your money." Part 2/4. The retirement party. Betrayal. I walked out into the parking lot. The October air was cold, cutting through my suit jacket. I stood on the curb, a 60-year-old man with no car, no wallet, and no home. Anyone watching would have seen a pathetic figure stripped of everything. But I wasn't pathetic. I checked my watch. 8:03 p.m. A black Lincoln Town car pulled up silently. The window rolled down, and Leonard Brooks looked out, my attorney for 30 years, the only man who knew where the bodies were buried. "Did she do it?" Leonard asked. I slid into the leather seat. "She did. Served me publicly. Victor demanded the keys and cards. They have possession of the physical assets." Leonard nodded, tapping his tablet. "And the signature?" "Signed. Divorce is filed. Separation date is established as of tonight. The Izzy's trigger is active." Leonard looked at me through the rearview mirror. "You know what happens next. Once I hit enter, there's no going back. The trust bylaws are automatic. Assets freeze for unauthorized users." I thought about Patricia's triumphant face, about Linda's influencers live streaming my humiliation, about Victor snapping his fingers at me like I was a waiter. "Do it," I said. "Initiate Protocol Omega, cancel the secondary cards, revoke authorized user status, notify the leasing companies, send notice to the property trustees. They want to play hardball. Let's show them what the majors look like." Leonard hit enter. The screen flashed green, then showed a processing bar. It was done. The financial structure my father built in 1975 to protect our family from exactly this scenario was now activated. The house they thought they owned belonged to the Feldman Family Trust. The cars they drove, leased through corporate agreements tied to my employment. The credit cards they'd been swiping for years, authorized user status, revoked the second Patricia filed for divorce. I wasn't cutting them off. I was pulling back the curtain on the reality they'd been living in for 38 years. Everything they touched, everything they thought was theirs, was actually mine. Or, more accurately, the trust's. And the trust had very specific rules about what happened when a spouse initiated divorce proceedings. "Where to?" Leonard asked. "The penthouse," I said. "I need to watch this unfold." I'd bought a small place downtown 3 months ago when I suspected Patricia might be planning something. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with a view of the lake. It was in the trust's name. Patricia had no idea it existed. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the banquet hall. Through the windows, I could see them toasting, ordering more champagne, probably, charging it to the card I'd just handed Victor. That card was already dead plastic. They were celebrating on the deck of the Titanic, and I just ordered the iceberg. The next morning, I made coffee in my new kitchen and watched the sun come up over Lake Michigan. My phone, a new prepaid model Patricia didn't know about, buzzed with a notification from the security system at the house. Motion detected at the front gate. I opened the app. The camera showed a tow truck backing into the driveway where Victor's Porsche was parked. Next to it, Linda's Range Rover sat gleaming in the morning light. Both vehicles were leased through Midwest Logistics' fleet program, company cars technically, and when I retired, when my employment status changed, those leases automatically terminated. The fine print was very clear about that. I watched Victor run out in silk pajamas, waving his arms. The tow truck driver, a big guy who clearly didn't care about Victor's tantrum, hooked the chains onto the Porsche's axle. Victor tried to block the truck. The driver said something that made my son step back real quick. Then Patricia appeared in her bathrobe, hair in curlers, frantically dialing her phone, probably trying to call me. My old phone was in a dumpster 3 blocks from the Holiday Inn. Linda came out filming with her phone, probably threatening to expose the driver to her 12,000 Instagram followers. The driver ignored her and lifted the Range Rover onto the flatbed. I switched cameras to the kitchen interior. Megan, Victor's wife, was pacing on the phone with her mother. "He cut us off," she said. "Everything's declined. Victor's card didn't work at the gas station. We had to walk home. Mom, you have to send money. I sipped my coffee. The cars were just the opening act. At 10 a.m., sharp, the doorbell rang at the house. Not the polite chime of a guest, the heavy knock of law enforcement. I switched to the front door camera. Sheriff Norman Garrett stood on the porch. Next to him was Leonard, holding a leather binder. Patricia opened the door, forcing a smile. "Can I help?" "You, Sheriff." Norman didn't smile back. "Ma'am, I'm here to escort Mr. Brooks, who has legal documents to serve regarding the occupancy of this premises. If this is about the divorce papers, he can send them to my lawyer," Patricia said, trying to close the door. Norman's hand stopped the door. "This isn't about the divorce. It's about property access." Victor pushed past his mother. "This is private property. You can't just barge in." Leonard stepped inside without asking permission. "This property is owned by the Feldman Family Trust. You are currently in violation of lease termination protocols." Patricia laughed. "This is my house. I've lived here for 20 years. Leonard opened the binder and pulled out a document in a plastic sleeve. "Do you recognize your signature, Mrs. Feldman?" Patricia squinted at the paper. I watched her face go slack. It was the residential lease agreement from 1988, 2 years after we married. I'd told her it was a tax formality, something the accountants needed. She'd signed it between sips of wine without reading a word. Part 3/4, The Retirement Party. Betrayal. Leonard read aloud. "The lease is contingent upon the continued employment of Howard Feldman as trustee and the continuation of legal marriage between tenants. By filing the petition for dissolution last night, you voluntarily terminated the qualifying conditions. The lease is void." "Where are we supposed to go?" Patricia whispered. "State law requires 30 days' notice," Norman said. "However, the trust is filing for emergency possession based on property security concerns. You'll need to appear in court Friday morning. I'd suggest you start packing." Victor started yelling about tenant rights. Leonard calmly explained they weren't tenants. Since the lease was voided, they were technically occupying trust property without authorization. The 30 days was a formality, but the court hearing would determine immediate possession. Then Leonard dropped the final bomb. "The emergency order applies to the structure and all furnishings owned by the trust. You may remove personal clothing and toiletries. Everything else remains trust property pending the hearing." Patricia screamed. She lunged at Leonard, trying to grab the binder. Norman intercepted her, warning that interference with legal proceedings would result in immediate arrest. I closed the laptop. Enough entertainment for one morning. 2 weeks later, I was in Superior Court. Patricia's lawyer, Roger Hastings, stood before Judge Nancy Richardson, demanding a forensic audit. He claimed I'd hidden assets, constructed a labyrinth of shell companies to defraud my loyal wife of millions. Leonard stood calmly at our table. He didn't have a stack of papers or a team of paralegals, just one banker's box. "Your Honor," Leonard said, "the plaintiff is correct. There are millions of dollars Mrs. Feldman can no longer access. However, Mr. Feldman hasn't hidden anything." He placed the box on the defense table. "The money isn't in offshore accounts. It's right here, in the receipts." He handed the judge a bound volume. Roger snatched his copy, confused. "What is this?" Roger demanded. "A 10-year forensic accounting of discretionary spending," Leonard said. "Mr. Feldman is a meticulous record keeper. Every credit card swipe, every wire transfer, cataloged and categorized." Leonard turned to address the courtroom. "Mrs. Feldman has charged $3.2 million to trust credit lines over the past decade. Designer clothing, jewelry, cosmetic procedures, including a particularly interesting line item, $5,000 monthly payments to a psychic in Sedona for aura cleansing." There was laughter in the back of the courtroom. Patricia turned red. "Victor Feldman," Leonard continued, "received $400,000 for 3 separate business ventures, a craft brewery, a cryptocurrency firm, and a sneaker resale app. All failed. Total revenue generated $0. Victor stood up. "That was seed capital. You can't count that against me." "It was a loan," Leonard said coldly, "against future inheritance. The trust bylaws are specific. Capital provided to beneficiaries is structured as a callable debt obligation." Roger was flipping through pages frantically, realizing his client had lied to him. "Linda Feldman," Leonard said, $35,000 in credit card debt, travel, hotels, photographers for her social media content. Tax returns show net income of $4,000 per year. The trust subsidized her entire existence. Leonard closed the book and looked at Judge Richardson. The plaintiffs asked where the money went. It went to Paris. It went to Prada. It went to failed cryptocurrency and psychic readings. Mr. Feldman didn't hide the assets. He watched them consume the assets. Roger was sweating. Your Honor, even if these figures are accurate, this was lifestyle spending during the marriage. And here, Leonard said, pulling one last document, is the master charter of the Feldman Family Trust, established by Howard's father in 1975. Clause 9, the recoupment clause. I stood. It was time to speak. Your Honor, I said, my father was a careful man. He wrote that clause to ensure the family fortune would never be squandered by incompetence. The clause states that in the event of a divorce initiated by a spouse, any funds spent in excess of standard living costs are retroactively reclassified as personal debt to the trust. Patricia gasped. She understood now. I'm not hiding assets, I said, looking at my family. I'm calling in the loan. They don't just have nothing, Your Honor. They owe the trust $3.7 million in documented overspending. With standard interest calculations over the repayment period, we're looking at roughly $5 million total liability. The courtroom erupted. Patricia screamed at Roger. Victor tried to leave, but the bailiff blocked the aisle. Linda was crying. Judge Richardson banged her gavel. Order! Mr. Hastings, I suggest you advise your clients to settle this debt before bankruptcy court gets involved. Motion to freeze assets, denied. Motion for forensic audit, unnecessary. As defense has provided comprehensive documentation, case dismissed. Roger slammed his briefcase shut and glared at Patricia. You told me he was hiding money. You didn't tell me you'd spent nearly $4 million. I'm done. Find another lawyer. He stormed out, leaving them standing in the wreckage. I walked past Patricia. She grabbed my arm. Howard, you can't do this. We don't have that kind of money. I gently removed her hand. I know, Patricia. That's why you need to get a job. The trust accepts monthly payments. Don't be late. Interest rate is prime plus 4%. 4 months passed. I settled into my new life. The penthouse was quiet, peaceful. I'd started seeing Dorothy, a history professor I met at the library 3 months before the divorce. We'd bonded over biographies, not bank statements. She had her own tenure, her own pension, her own mind. She didn't need my money. She just liked talking to me. One Saturday morning, my building's front desk called. Mr. Feldman, you have visitors. They say they're family. I knew this was coming. Send them up. Part 4 of 4. The Retirement Party. Betrayal. Patricia, Victor, and Linda stepped off the elevator looking like they'd aged 10 years in 4 months. Patricia wore a cheap coat from Walmart where she'd been working as a cashier. Victor's hands were rough and calloused from construction work. Linda had no makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. They stood in my foyer, taking in the marble floors, the lake view, the grand piano. Patricia's eyes darted around, calculating, realizing that while she'd been scanning groceries, I'd been living well. Howard, Patricia whispered, we came because we couldn't sleep. The guilt has been eating us alive. We were wrong, so wrong. Money is poison. Victor dropped to his knees. Dad, I'm sorry. That construction, job, it broke me down. I know what work means now. I just want my father back. Linda joined him on the floor. I miss you, Daddy. I don't care about the designer bags. I just want to have dinner with you again. I looked at them. 3 actors performing for an audience of 1. If I hadn't known better, I might have been moved. But I'd done my homework. My private investigator had audio from their motel room 3 nights ago. I'd heard them rehearsing this scene. Patricia coaching them. Tell him you've learned. Tell him the work changed you. Get on your knees. Make him feel like the savior. They thought this was a heist. They thought I was lonely, desperate for family, waiting to be manipulated back into opening the checkbook. Stand up, I said. You're making a scene, and I just had the floors polished. They scrambled to their feet, hope flaring in their eyes. Come in, sit down. They walked into the living room like prisoners entering a courtroom. On the coffee table sat a navy. Blue folder, the label read, Feldman Trust Reorganization and Reinstatement Protocol. Patricia's eyes locked onto it. She nudged Victor. He looked down. Linda stared. To them, that folder was a time machine, a ticket back to country clubs and Porsches. You say you've learned, I said, sitting across from them. Tell me what you've learned, Victor. He sat up straight. I learned that nothing is given, Dad. When you sweat for $1, it feels different. Respect is earned. And you, Linda. I learned that appearances are a trap. I was chasing likes from strangers when I should have valued the people who loved me. Patricia? She looked at me, tears streaming. I learned that marriage isn't a contract. It's a partnership. I broke that partnership. I listened to bad advice. I let my ego drive. I'm willing to sign a postnup, live in a studio, whatever it takes to earn back your trust. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I leaned forward and placed my hand on the folder. I'm glad to hear that, because I've been thinking too. Living here alone gives a man perspective. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe the shock was too much. Patricia sobbed with relief. I realized that cutting you off wasn't the solution. You needed structure, a path back. Yes, Victor said eagerly. A chance to prove ourselves. I opened the folder. Inside were 3 employment contracts. This represents a new beginning, a way back into the family, financial security, purpose, and most importantly, restored connection. I separated the contracts and slid them across. One to Patricia, one to Victor, one to Linda. But there are conditions. This isn't a handout. You said you understand work. Sign these. They didn't read them. They saw the Feldman Trust logo and grabbed the pens. They signed their names with desperate speed. When they finished, Patricia handed the papers back with a smile. Thank you, Howard. You won't regret this. I checked the signatures. Valid, binding, irrevocable. No, Patricia, I said, standing. I don't think I will. I walked to the intercom. Leonard, bring in the materials. The study door opened. Leonard walked in carrying 3 bundles of gray fabric. Uniforms? Victor asked, his smile faltering. I picked up the contract Patricia had signed. Welcome back to the company. You just signed employment contracts for the distribution center I consult with. Entry-level positions. I pointed to the bundles. Patricia, customer service representative, $16 an hour. Victor, warehouse associate, $18 per hour. Linda, social media coordinator for an industrial supply brand, $20 an hour. Patricia stood, her face purple. This is a joke, I held up the contract. Clause 1. Employment is at will, but acceptance is prerequisite for any future consideration regarding trust beneficiary status. You said you wanted to work. You said you wanted to earn it. This is the offer. Take it or leave it. Victor looked at the gray work shirt with his name patch. His hands shook. You can't be serious, Patricia said. I'm completely serious, I replied. Or you can walk out that door. But if you do, you violate the contracts you just signed, and the door to this family closes forever. This is the offer. Take it or leave it. They looked at each other. They looked at the luxury penthouse. They looked at me. Patricia's stomach growled. They hadn't eaten a real meal in days. Start Monday, I said. 6 a.m. Don't be late. 14 months later, my phone rang on a Sunday morning. Dorothy was reading at the table while I cooked eggs. Dad? Victor's voice sounded different, older, steadier. I got accepted to the logistics management program at the community college. Starts this fall. Could you maybe review my application essay sometime? I felt my throat tighten. I'd be honored, son. When I hung up, Dorothy looked at me over her reading glasses. You did the right thing. It almost killed you, but you did it. I didn't destroy my family, I said quietly. I saved them from destroying themselves. 3 weeks later, I met Linda at a coffee shop. She'd paid off her credit cards. She'd built a small freelance consulting business. She looked me in the eye for the first time in years. Why did you let us hit bottom? She asked. Because I loved you too much to let you stay entitled children forever, I said. She cried. I hugged her. First physical contact in over a year. Patricia still works customer service. We're not reconciled. Maybe we never will be. But last month she sent me a check for $500, first payment on the debt. In the memo line she'd written, "Thank you." I didn't cash it. I framed it. Because that check represented something worth more than the entire debt. It represented the first dollar she'd ever earned that she truly valued. They thought I destroyed them. They thought I was cruel. What I actually did was give them the greatest gift a father can give: the privilege of struggle, the dignity of earning, the pride of standing on your own 2 feet. I didn't take away their inheritance. I gave them something better. I gave them back themselves. Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone you love is to keep rescuing them from their own mistakes. Because every time you save them, you steal another piece of the person they could have become. The greatest inheritance I could leave my children wasn't my money. It was the lesson that nothing worth having comes easy, and the only wealth that matters is what you build with your own 2 hands.